Hello and welcome to Unlock $10,000 in Revenue Growth with RevOps Science. On behalf of Startout, we welcome you to this workshop. For those of you who may not be familiar with Startout, we accelerate the growth of the LGBTQ plus community to drive its economic empowerment, building a world where every LGBTQ plus entrepreneur has equal access to lead, succeed, and shape the workforce of the future. I would like to now introduce your speaker, Jonathan J. Mentor. Jonathan is a revenue growth expert who provokes the economic growth and visibility of the underrepresented humans in B2B tech. He's proud to be a Latinx Black queer father. He's the founder and CEO of Successment, a revenue growth partner for diverse tech startups, where he developed RevOps Science, a data-powered approach to startup growth that electrifies growth, strategy, and campaigns. His inspiration for Successment is his commitment to the success of disadvantaged humans. Jonathan, turn it over to you.
Hey everyone, thank you so much for the introduction. I always get so humbled when I get introduced that way. I consider myself a revenue growth enthusiast. How about that? I'm a fan of making it happen. And the way that we've made it happen for the past 15 years in my career, anyway, has been through unlocking data, using that to um, align different functions within the startup and making sure that all of the data and the strategy move in the direction of revenue. And then you actually take those things to life, because there are a lot of different schools of thought out there and different tactics. And there are a lot of schools of thought out there related to strategy, but RevOps Science takes revenue off the shelf from a data perspective and puts it into motion. So I'd love to actually hear from some of the people that are here, since this is a nice, small, intimate group. If anybody'd like to introduce themselves, while I prepare the last steps on the presentation. And I'll be sharing some notes inside of the chat as well. It's okay. We have an introverted group today, so we'll go on ahead and get started. So this presentation today, and I will definitely be leaving some space at the end for questions, very specific use cases as it applies to your different startups, right at the end. So let me introduce myself. My name is Jonathan J. Mentor. I'm the founder and the CEO of Successment. We're a revenue growth partner for underrepresented startups in the tech ecosystem. We focus on startups that are at or around the $1 million mark. We work directly with startups to focus on their strategy and their campaigns to get them to their first $10 million in revenue. This year, we also work with the world in a different way with the Provoke Visibility campaign. The Provoke Visibility campaign is directed at underrepresented economies. We launched a pilot in Tulsa, Oklahoma, which is the site of the historic Black Wall Street, and in Santo Domingo in the Dominican Republic, which is a developing nation with all of the right moves, the right ingredients in order to build a robust tech ecosystem. So in this way, we focus not only on underrepresented humans that are above the $1 million mark and working directly with them to get to their first $10 million ARR, but we also work with different communities, economies, and groups of people like Startout, like Techstars, like Black Ambition, like Parallel 18, like Boost, like Forbes Black, in order to empower communities through programming like the one that you're about to experience today in underrepresented economies. If you want to hang out with me, ask me questions, stuff like that, you can check me out on my website, jonathanjmentor.co. All my socials are really easy to follow, or I'm a Google search away. What is the mission? Why am I here? Why am I working specifically with a partner like Startout? Well, to us, Provoke Visibility is an annual campaign where we work with 10 startups to get them to their first $10 million in revenue. And each year, we want to contribute to underrepresented economies, queer economies, Black economies, female-led economies, trans economies, Latin economies, in order to contribute $100 million in net new economic growth. That $100 million in growth gives them access to a bold future, and it contributes to diversity in tech, closing the wealth gap, and enabling communities with resources that they didn't have. And selfishly, I like to create a nicer world for my little daughter here. Shout out to Zariah Rose. She's right over here. And this is needed. Why? Because the founders at startup represent the disparity in technology, which is why it's important to get around to it. I'll get off my soapbox shortly, but just for you guys to know, when you're dealing with a startup and it's underrepresented and led, not only do you have to unpack all kinds of trauma and stuff, but you have a big old gap in the types of resources that are available to the greater community. It's a multi-billion-dollar community. I believe it's approaching 1 trillion. And here are kind of the abysmal numbers where we're represented. So let's dig in. What is RevOps Science? RevOps Science is a process and our intellectual property that myself and a couple of other people that they call geniuses at Successment have put together with cumulatively about 30 years of experience, 15 years being mine alone. And we framed it in through the lens of RevOps Science. RevOps Science uncomplicates growth in 3 steps called process, performance, and progress. And it's interesting because when people think about growth, it can mean a lot of different things. So what you're not going to learn about today is you're not going to learn about how to grow your startup by raising capital. You're not going to learn how to grow your startup by doing a huge sales blitz. You're not going to learn about how to grow a startup by using resources that you don't already have. This is designed for startups that already have they're past their ideation phase. They may or may not be in market. They may or may not be generating revenue. This is to deepen the revenue streams that you have, explore other revenue streams, and focus on what you need to do in order to get the entire organization in front of revenue outside of just sales and just marketing. So the first step in RevOps Science is the process. We call our process BOOM: begin, operate, obviate, and maximize. The first step in any startup where you're trying to make sure that you're generating revenue is to discover. It's very simple without overcomplicating it. You have to make sure that the goals that you set out for yourself as a founder are prioritized as opportunities within your startup. You can perform this in a couple of ways. By collecting qualitative data, you can do a listening tour. You can listen to your customers. You can listen to yourself. You can listen to your team. You can listen to the market. You can listen to anybody under the sun. As long as you're listening with an eye on qualitative data, you begin to look at, in aggregate, how your solutions are interacting with the market, how it is that your product or services are positioned to address the market. And then you make sure that, A, you can measure those things, because if you can't measure them, then they're not something that you can grow. Because if you don't know where you start, you don't know where you're going. And then you can also make sure that in terms of all the actions, activities, staff, investments inside of the startup, in terms of resources and humans inside of the startup, that they're all aligned on what those goals are. I'll give you a perfect example of how this can go wrong. If you have a subject matter expert within your startup that's focused on the product, or another subject matter expert within your startup that's focused on sales, this can go wrong in a couple of different ways if they're not aligned on the priorities within your startup and they're not aligned on the goals that they can measure, because these are subject matter experts, not founders. So that means that they're going to be working to improve metrics, whereas you, the founder, you're going to be focused on overall revenue growth, very different metrics. So making sure that whatever activities, actions, ideas, strategies, tactics, campaigns, asks that they're making of you as a founder, making sure that they move in the direction of revenue growth, or challenging them to make sure that they can draw the line between what they're doing and revenue growth, really helps to align the organization and takes it out of metrics and into revenue growth. Another perfect example of how this can go wrong in a very tactical way is if you focus your entire growth strategy on sales and marketing, then what happens to retention, right? You can have a very strong month, you can have a very strong quarter, you can generate revenue, but if it's not recurring, you're not going to convince an investor to invest their capital in growing your overall operation. So when you're focused on overall revenue growth, rather than something just like sales or marketing, or even in the product world, building more versions of the product, or in the customer success world, just retaining all of the customers that you have, you start to challenge those champions within your ecosystem as a startup, and you start making them think about, okay, because you're doing X amount of sales, or because you have X amount of pipeline, or whatever the thing is, right? How does this translate into sustainable, defensible, measurable growth? How do we defend that growth? How can we capitalize on it? How can we minimize the things that we shouldn't be doing and moving in the direction of the things that we can? And if you strengthen that by making sure that you can always measure those numbers with your tech stack, it makes it very easy for you to discover what it is that you need to be doing, where it is that you started, where you're going, and in what amount of time. Once you finish discovering and the first step begin, you want to move to step number 2, which is operate. This is time to go. You've done your research, you have your data, you have your benchmarks, you have your goals, you have your campaigns. You want to go into market. And sometimes it's difficult to do because as a founder, you're always going to be ideating and thinking about how can I make this better? How can I make this perfect? How can I solve this other problem? But if you take the time to sit with your team and sit with the resources that you have inside of your startup, you want to make sure that you capitalize on that time spent and make sure that you defend your priorities and you optimize outcomes. Because while you're in market, you want to be discovering two things. Number one, are we moving the needle on the metrics that matter? Because if we can't make a dollar tomorrow, what are we doing to move in the direction of making that dollar, right? And what was the timeline that we planned on that? If things don't go according to plan, you can course correct without having to throw everything in the startup in the garbage and start from scratch. So you want to focus on making sure that your priorities rule the day and all of the things, the moving parts, the humans and the campaigns that are doing them are all aligned in the direction of optimizing those outcomes. The other thing that you want to test for while you're in step 2 operate is this scalable, right? A lot of startups, when they're going to their first $1 million, it's a combination of a lot of passion, a lot of energy, a lot of endurance, and it's usually the product of founder-led sales. Founder-led sales, maybe you'll get lucky and get to $1 million, you won't get to 10. So we want to make sure that whatever actions in whatever division of the company or the startup are operating, is it scalable? And if it's not scalable, then you need to keep the lights on by making sure that that's still in play today. How is it that we can automate it, digitalize it, strengthen it to make sure that it's scalable and repeatable, which takes us over to step number 3. Step number 3 is when you're ready to scale, called obviate. This is when you want to launch actions and shield growth. You don't want to go through steps 1 and 2 and do this huge sales blitz or land all these customers just to find out that according to whatever you promised investors or whatever goals you set for the team, they're no longer scalable once you reach a certain volume of business, right? And doing business by yourself as a solo founder is very different than doing business at multi-millions of dollars with a team that you also have to manage. So you want to make sure that as you grow, your startup and the processes and systems and goals grow with you. Because one of the easiest ways for a startup to fail is to do a blitz, get a huge success in terms of sales, touch $1 million or $2 or $3 million, and then everything falls apart because you can't retain. And then you're no longer focused on net new sales, you're focused on churn. And then as soon as you fix churn, you're focused right back on sales. And then when you fix sales, you go right back to churn again. So it's a hamster wheel. So you want to make sure at each stage of growth that you're focused on, is this going to be scalable in the long run? And what steps can I take to make sure that it becomes scalable? Which takes us to step number 4, which is maximize. Maximize is when you want to stay agile, right? So in steps number 1 and 2, you want to focus on making sure that you have your goals set. But what if something happens within the market that indicates something outside of your control that you need to shift, right? Somebody from your sector or an influencer from your market says something negative about your company. How are you going to react to that? What if all of a sudden you expected to get 10 net new clients a month, but your campaign exceeds expectations and you get 25? How do you react to that? Are you tracking KPIs that are leading towards revenue growth, or are you tracking KPIs because the marketing agency told you to? Are you tracking KPIs because the customer success person says this is what they did at their last job, right? You want to focus on what's going to work in your startup because nobody has the specific set of vulnerabilities, strengths, and superpowers that you have. So really step out of templatizing everything in this step, maximize, and focus on what do I have that makes us special that we can leverage in order to move towards revenue growth. The easiest way to find out what those special things are is the second step in the process. And this actually helps you to build boom. It's called right, wrong, missing, and confused. And it's a really, really simple exercise, but it can get really detailed and it can be a powerful indicator of your overall revenue growth when done correctly. Let's dig into how it works. When you're sitting there and trying to plan, okay, what is going to be the strategy today, tomorrow, this quarter, next week, next month? You want to focus on what are the things that I'm doing right? Or excuse me, what are the things that my startup is doing right? What are we doing wrong? What's missing and what's confusing? And then what you want to do is you always want to make sure that whatever the things that you're naming, you can measure. Because if you can't measure, it's going to be very difficult for you to translate that into your team, and even more difficult for you to translate it into external stakeholders like investors and customers. So you want to make sure that whatever you think you're doing right, wrong, missing, you can measure, because then it turns from a thought into a fact. The way that you really leverage right, wrong, missing, confused is as a founder, you perform the exercise and then you challenge yourself and humble yourself by asking your key stakeholders to do it independently of yourself as well. And you'll be surprised how what external stakeholders or even your team or your co-founders, when given the chance to do it independently, how different what they see you're doing right, wrong, missing, confused is. And then what you want to do is you want to see what in aggregate, what does everybody think that we're doing right? Are we measuring this correctly? What does everybody that matters to my startup think we're doing wrong? Okay, we can measure those things. What's missing? What's confused? And then based on that, you can prioritize very concrete tactical campaigns that can move the needle. Give you an example. What are we doing right? We're doing right. Okay, founder-led sales. Every time the founder gets on the phone, they close a sale. So that's what we're doing right. How do you measure that? Well, the founder closes 10 more sales than any other person on the team. Cool. How can we leverage that, right? Well, maybe one priority campaign would be the founder needs to take a break from doing sales and actually templatize what they're doing to make that sale come through. Start training others to do those sales. That way, in a small pause, right? We're not going to have a heart attack that sales aren't going to come in, because if we go slow, we can grow fast. And if we go slow in terms of this campaign, although it's not a revenue campaign, right? I'm not going to get revenue from sitting there as the founder and teaching other people on my team how it is that I get 10 more sales than them. But once I accomplish that, and I can start teaching 10 other humans on my team to do it, then imagine what the upside is. And all I had to do was sit out of the ball game for a month or two to make sure that I got my training right, I got my template right, I tested it, I QA'd it, now I can deploy and I can go back to fundraising. Another thing missing, right? While you're busy fundraising or while you're busy developing brands or whatever it is that you do as a founder, there might be other members of your team saying, what's really missing is I don't have a key metric to hit this week. What's really missing is you want me to go out and do a sales blitz and I don't have any business development. I don't have any prospecting. I don't have any software tools. Again, this can be converted into a priority campaign, because if you want those salespeople, the same ones that you took a pause on, to make sure that they can sell the way that you do, and then from there, they don't have the software that you have access to, then it becomes clear across your startup what things need to be fixed or what's missing that needs to be a priority campaign. And I use the word campaign loosely because campaign, you think campaign, you think either politics or sales or marketing. No. A campaign is an action or a plan or a project that you have within your startup that moves you in the direction of revenue. And trust and believe, if you slow down so you can go fast and you focus on the things that are confused or wrong or missing, you'll see how many things that you're doing that you can do better to leverage your growth and make it go faster, and how many things that you're doing that are really just getting in the way. And 9 times out of 10, just like I like to use the example of a child, right? If you're a mom or a dad like me, you're always going to have the best interests of your baby in mind, but you can't be a doctor and operate on her tonsils when she gets tonsillitis, right? You can't sit there and teach her ABCs the way that a teacher can, right? So you need to make sure that you get the insurance, you go to the doctor, you keep up with the appointments, you keep the maintenance, you have the immunizations, right? Same thing with school. She needs a book, she needs crayons, she needs a book bag, she needs this. You need to do the same exact thing with your team, learn to let go, and sometimes learn how to get out of your own way. So with right, wrong, missing, confused, as a founder, if you're able to really capture that, make sure that it's measurable and dictate, okay, these are the priorities that I see for the startup. This is what we need to be doing every single day. This is what we need to be doing next month. These are the numbers that we need to hit next week, month, year, quarter, etc. And your team challenges you on that. Welcome that. Because if these are humans that you've cultivated to be on your team, that you trust with your growth, they have the best interest in mind for the startup, and they may be seeing opportunities that you don't see. So in order to build your boom, in order for you to begin, you need to understand what's going on in your startup that's right, wrong, missing, and confused. And by the way, I have templates and playbooks for this all available on my website totally for free. I don't take anybody's email. I don't market to you. I don't text you and say, hey, do you want to? No. These are all free tools for underrepresented humans that want to build their startup. If you want them, I will provide them to you after today's session. The second step in RevOps Science is performance. And we call our performance indicator the revenue growth formula. Now, you'll see something here that's very uncontroversial. You've probably seen it on Google. This is simply a buyer journey. But what we do with the buyer journey is we use the buyer journey to represent pillars of revenue that represent opportunities that are usually at the $1 million mark not being executed upon. These are called awareness, engagement, enablement, lands, and expands. And these represent the 5 opportunities within any B2B startup to start generating revenue. When you're at the $1 million mark, likely what you're going to recognize as growth is going to be enablement and engagement, because that's where all the sales and marketing stuff is. But as you start to grow and mature as a startup, as you begin to get a better handle on your numbers, metrics, and goals, as your humans within your startup that are working on you become more aligned on how their role factors into overall revenue growth, it becomes clear that there are different opportunities within each buyer stage that also represent the different departments that focus on each of those stages and how they can ladder up to revenue, right? Let's give an example. I'll use the enablement pillar as an example, and then we can apply it to the other ones that are here. Within enablement, this represents after a prospect has become aware that they have a problem. You're generating awareness, you are headlining them, you're giving very brief information about your solution and how it connects to them, right? Then you're going to engage them. You're no longer talking at them. You're no longer a billboard on the side of the highway, but now they're engaging with you. It's a two-way conversation. They're interacting with your content. They're getting you clicks. They're asking you questions. They're commenting. They're curious. They want more information. They're downloading, right? This is where a lot of founders are very masterful, because they can talk in circles around how wonderful their product is, how technical it is, how wonderful it is. But if you don't get them aware and on the hook first, you're going to be talking to a very small audience, and it's always going to be you doing the work. So eventually, whomever is building your brand, you want to make sure that they have the data to start building that up. That way you start hedging against that vulnerability in the startup. As you begin building this, whatever this pillar is, engagement, for example, what data do you need in order to find out that people are engaging with you? How are you measuring? Do you call it clicks, or do you call it bounce, or do you call it this, or you don't call it that? Here's the secret. I don't care what you call it. It needs to be something that you can understand, and that whomever's in charge of whatever that metric is, it's less about the metric and more about, okay, whatever that thing is that you're measuring, great. Can you tell me how it connects to revenue? Oh, traffic on the website. You want to do SEO for me and you want to charge me $2,500 a month because of that YouTube ad that I clicked on? Great. Tell me how SEO is going to ladder up to revenue. Tell me the metrics that I should be monitoring. Tell me how long, what resources do you need? What access do you need? If they can't answer that question, they shouldn't be working with you at this stage in your startup, unless they can give you very clearly defined, this is the data that I need in order to generate revenue from marketing. These are the KPIs that I need to improve on the path to my OKR, which is whatever, right? And once I reach that OKR, this is what's going to give you revenue. Perfect example. If you have a website, right, and that website is designed for information consumption and nobody clicks, then your first step is going to be, okay, what's my offer? That's a campaign. I need to develop an offer. Once I have that offer, what's the call to action? That's another data point. How many people are clicking on the button? Once they click on the button, they become a lead. How do I define a lead? How do they become a market qualified lead? How do they become a sales qualified lead? These data points matter to the marketer, right? Because they ladder up, not so much to you, the founder, because who the hell cares? You're busy raising funds and you're busy building a brand. You're busy changing the world. It might matter to that marketer. Great. Don't bother yourself with those details. I need the headline of what KPIs you're trying to hit. What data do you need? What resources do you need? How long is it going to take you to improve that? How does that impact the next metric up on the ladder? And then when are we going to see revenue from here? You can do the same thing in product. Give you a perfect example. If you don't have the money to do paid ads, or if you don't have the money for client acquisitions, or your CAC is too high, right? Instead of focusing on a sales blitz, focus on a product blitz. How the hell do you do that, Jonathan? Well, if you have a body of clients or customers and they're generating, I don't know, let's say $200,000, $300,000, $10,000, whatever the number is, right? How many clients does that represent? Let's say it's 10. You go to those 10 clients and they're paying customers. They're coming to you month after month for whatever your product or service is. And you ask them a couple of questions. Why are you here? What's the competition? What are the problems are you trying to solve? What were you doing before you were here? What would you consider doing after? What do you hate about us? What do you love about us? What other issues have we been able to solve for you that we didn't expect, right? And out of those 10 customers, if 50 of them have very similar answers, then you go to your product team and you say, hey, product, listen, out of out of these 10 customers or 1,000 or whatever it is, 50% of them in aggregate say that our product, which is product A, is solving A, B, and C problem, but they still have a budget of $10,000 a month and they're solving problem number D with the guys across the street. Can you please build me a widget or a feature or a product in beta so that way we can release to our current customers? Because it's going to come a hell of a lot more affordable if we can release a beta product to our current customer, upsell to them, even if it's at 50%, rather than going on a net new client acquisition campaign, right? And then they're going to say, okay, doable. Let me tell you what I need. This is the data that I need. The first KPI is going to be testing the thing. The second thing is going to be the QA. The third thing is going to be the release. Then we got to communicate how we're going to release it out to the client. Then we got to get behavior. You see, all of those data points ladder up into that ultimate data point, which is revenue, which is, okay, how many did we sell at the end of the day? How many upsells of this new beta product B were we able to sell, right? And then that indication, that outcome dictates for you where you can place your emphasis, right? Okay, now as a founder, since you had success on upselling, do we really need to go out back into the marketing? Is that even necessary? Or should we focus on product road mapping? Now that we know that we can sell product B, should we focus on product C, D, E, F, and G? Or should we go back to market and sell product B instead of product A? What's more lucrative? Who's going to stay longer? Who's paying more? Who are the customers that are advantage? You see what I mean? So when you focus on all the different areas and revenue opportunities within the startup, outside of just sales and marketing, where we're good and comfy, outside of just fundraising for, outside of just tap dancing for the investors and hoping they're going to write us a check, you start looking at different revenue growth opportunities that might come at an even better cost that you can do more efficiently. And this can happen for each and every one of the pillars. Brands can do it. Sales can do it, marketing can do it, customer success can do it, etc. Right? I'll give you another example, another area of opportunity. If you're in sales and all your salespeople see is, okay, we're going to do direct sales. I'm going to do my, I have my, what is it? My BDR. My BDR is going to generate this list. This is the list that I'm going to do. This is how I know how to do sales. What if you take a step back and take a look at what about a channel sale play, right? You're selling Rogaine to the bald guys. How about we sell Rogaine to the barbers? How can we make this work, right? What if we take a pause from this full-on sales blitz out in market because we're focused on this and focusing on the metrics that matter to sales, which is how many phone calls did we dial? How big are our lists? How many emails did we get out? How many confirm? Maybe those are the wrong metrics. Who knows? What if we stop that whole damn thing and have the sales department focus on channel-led sales? Right? How about we, instead of selling Rogaine to the bald guys, we sell Rogaine to the barbers? Well, this changes our mindset as an organization. What metrics are we monitoring? What data do we need? What actions do we need to take? What collateral do we need to develop? What are the outcomes? What's the upside? What's the downside? How long are we going to try this thing before we know that it's a success or a failure? And how do we measure that revenue? Right? Because in 1 month, you might sell 10 bottles of Rogaine, right, to 10 different bald guys on the street, but you sell 100 bottles of Rogaine to a barbershop, they're selling all month for you. Look at the upside on that. All because you changed the way that you look at your data. Very, very important. I want to pause here to see if there are any specific questions because now we're 30 minutes in and I want to make sure that everybody's with me.
Not a question actually, but I just want to thank you for the way you've broken these things down. Many of us really do not understand it like to this extent. So just keep it up. I'm learning a lot and I'm taking notes. Thank you.
Wonderful. My pleasure. Any other comments, feedback, questions? I see a Bajan Morez. I destroyed his name. I'm so sorry. Come correct me.
Hi, Jonathan. Thanks for sharing today. I wanted to ask if for determining the KPIs or OKRs, is there a formula or a method in determining those numbers?
Yes. Right over here. Right, wrong, missing, and confused. You're the founder.
Okay.
So at the end of the day, your job is to provide beans, bullets, and band-aids to your team, everything that they need to succeed. So the formula is very, very simple. Very, very simple. If you want to establish KPIs to power up, let's say, sales. Let's say you're one of the, I can't convince you, right? I'm like, sales is we're doing sales-led growth at my startup, right? You're going to say, okay, well, the way I'm looking at sales growth is number of leads, right? And you're right, wrong makes confused. Your sales leader says, no, that's wrong. because leads don't have any impact on conversion. You can get me 100,000 leads. If none of them convert, what are we really doing, right? The metric that we need to be focused on is conversion, right? So in order to determine what the KPIs and the OKRs are, right, step out of lead from behinds. And if you don't have those members of your team with you, then reach out to your board of mentors that start out. Reach out to a Jonathan, reach out to whomever it is that you trust to sit there and brainstorm with them and iterate what should those metrics be, because the death of a startup comes very quickly when you're obsessed on numbers that don't matter.
Thank you.
Questions, comments, feedback? Okay, let's rock and roll. Okay, in terms of overall growth, when you want to make decisions as a founder, or if you're in discussions with an investor, which, by the way, side note, because I listen, I could sit on my soapbox from here until next year. I'll never convince a founder to stop fundraising, not at $1 million. But if you are able to demonstrate to a founder that you have a good grip on different revenue streams and how close you are to, okay, I have these sales, right? But I'm also developing revenue from channel partners. I'm also developing revenue from reselling to current customers. I'm also developing revenue from community-led growth. I'm also developing customers from inbound motion. They're going to love you so much that they're going to write you checks faster. So you're going to hear me say this quite a lot, that sometimes you just need to slow down so you can grow fast. The best Olympic cyclist in the world, right, to get from point A to point B is not going to beat a Ferrari in a straightforward race, right? But he's doing the best he can with the best training that he can, with the best tool that he can, a bike. But that dumbass in a Ferrari is going to dust him because he has horsepower. So sometimes it's necessary to slow down so you can grow fast. Am I in the bike or am I in the Ferrari? Wait a minute. Let me really be cognizant of what's happening here. Should I be selling this Rogaine to the bald guys, or do I need to be selling this Rogaine to the barbershops? Let me make sure that I'm focusing on the right numbers. And the way that you do that is by making sure that you put your benchmarks and annual goals in perspective and analyze it from a perspective of the revenue growth formula, right? So you want to make sure that you don't want to keep the lights off, right? It's not slow down to grow fast doesn't mean stop everything that you're doing, focus on this, and no. You got to keep the lights on. So you want to make sure that you prioritize your growth pillars. Where is the revenue coming from, right? How many founders that we know are making sales and then they say, you know what, I want to do a net new product release. Why? For what? Oh, because I can sell more. How do you know? How do you know that this product is going to sell? They don't, right? Instead of making decisions on where you're going to place your funding and your capital and your resources and your teams and your priorities based on, okay, this is what, I think is going to work, because no, go where the revenue grows, right? If you're making net new $1 million because you stopped going after net new client acquisition and you're able to sell 4 more products to your current customer base, what in the hell are you worried about talking to the SEO agency for? Why are you even talking to an investor? They should be talking to you, right? If you're able to get inbounds from marketing and everybody's clicking on your website, why are you focused on hiring a sales executive from Accenture because you think that they're going to double your sales? You don't know. This is your startup. Go where the revenue grows. The data will tell you. So when you analyze the growth motion in terms of strategy, tactics, and outcomes, in this way, awareness, engagement, enablement, land, and expand, you can prioritize where you're placing your resources. You can play it safe and say, you know what, for next year, what I really want to do is I want to double down on sales, or I want to double down on retention, on customer success, because that's been a weakness, right? These are going to be the outcomes for me. You can see where across the organization you're placing your resources in terms of dollars and cents. Because if you talk to a guy like Jonathan Mentor, all I'm focused on is ARR. You can talk to me about this wonderful month you had. You can talk to me about, oh my God, I did this event. Is it scalable? Is it repeatable? Can you defend it? What's the retention? How long are you keeping them? What's the churn? Because one specific metric like, oh, a sale has an effect on many other different metrics. So having a proactive approach and having the foresight to be able to look at what those things are count in the long run and in the short run, because it's all about this thing right here. You set goals on the clock, which are metrics and KPIs, and you set those against goals on the calendar, which is revenue growth and retention. So what you want to do is you want to focus on, okay, based on whatever your year goal is for whatever pillar you're focused on, right? You say, okay, I'm starting here. We're doing, I don't know, 1,000 sales a whatever the number is, right? This is what it is. I want to improve that by X% by the end of the year. That's going to amount in X amount of revenue, right? You take that, all right? You take your year goal, you take your benchmark, which is what you did the previous year or whatever amount of time that you have, and you divide that by the goal. That's going to tell you the percentage of the way that you are from here to 12 months from now or whatever time period you are and how you're going to set it, okay? Then you're going to take that percentage. Well, this is really set for annual. So if you're annual, this is the formula to follow. But if you have a different period of time, like let's say you're setting goals on a quarter or a month or a week or whatever, we can talk about those things. I actually see an opportunity here, as I always do, to update this slide to make it more flexible so that it doesn't have to go by the year. But the headline on this slide is for you to focus on what is it that you're doing? Again, right, wrong, missing, confused. What are you doing right? Right? If you really think that I need to invest the majority of my new capital raise on sales, let me look at what sales produced me last year, because sales produced me a hell of a lot of sales, but then look at churn. I'm not investing anything in customer success for retention. And if I invest in customer success for retention, I'm going to have all these customers that are floating on product A. My product price never changes. I need to upsell them. So now I need to focus some resources on product. So with the chain of events that you can see from a high level and that you can help plan for, and when you have these conversations with investors, they're going to take you more seriously. This takes us to the last P. This takes us to the last P in RevOps Science, which is progress. This is called a parallel growth plan. A parallel growth plan puts your KPIs on the clock and your OKRs on the calendar. So you can, usually startups do it on a quarterly basis, but you want to make sure from the onset that you're focused on the right things. You're a founder. I don't want you to sit there talking about, oh, how many leads did we get? How much revenue did we generate? None. Okay. Why? What data point indicates that for me? This data point, great. Well, according to the plan that we set, we should have had revenue in this specific pillar by now. What went wrong? And by pinpointing whatever that action is, whatever in that pillar is, you can decide one of two things. Did we just launch the campaign incorrectly? Do we just need to change the campaign? Cool, right? Whoever your subject matter expert in customer success or product or sales or marketing, they're going to be able to answer that question for you if they're worth whatever it is that you're paying them in equity or a salary, right? If not, are we focused on the wrong metric, right? Didn't turn out the way that we wanted. We went on a blitz to generate net new sales, but then that negatively affected churn. We focused on improving site traffic, but then that negatively affected conversion rate. We focused obsessively on conversion rate, but we didn't have any plan for them to upsell within 6 months. Are we focused on the right things? And in very broad strokes, what I see for first-time founders or early-stage founders, I capture on the left here metrics that from a big old growth level, they like to focus. Headcount, how many employees do we have? I don't care. V-releases, how many versions of our current technology? I don't care about that either. Content, are we posting 5 times a day, 6 times a day? Are we on TikTok? I don't care about that either. Leads, how many leads do we have? I don't care about leads if they don't convert. Sales, I don't care about how many sales we have if they don't stay. And press, I don't care how many times we've been in the New York Times if we don't know how to leverage that into a content conversion strategy, right? What you can measure growth on when you're not measuring overall revenue is your community. Because your community, whether it's external or internal, you can always sell to them, test with them, ask with them, and uncover with them different data points and opportunities to resell or generate revenue. Your customer is your best friend. You're a startup. You are not JP Morgan. You're not JetBlue. You're not Amazon. Amazon cannot pick up the phone tomorrow and say, hey, I noticed that yesterday you had to say, you left your shopping cart open. Why? How can I help you? You can be like, who the hell are you? Either that or it's coming from a call center, but you're a fucking startup, right? And I'm fairly confident that this group of startup founders is not anywhere near 2 or 3 or 4 or $5 million. Maybe some of you are at the $1 million mark. Leverage your smallness. It's definitely an opportunity. Pick up that phone and call that customer and say, hey, you mean a lot to me. You're one of only 1,000 customers, and I'm building this thing from scratch. I'm a queer founder. You matter to me. I would like to understand why it is that you don't do business with us anymore, right? That's your customer. They can talk to you. Product. How's the usage of your product, right? Is it being used in the way that you thought? This is my thing when it comes to product, right? I love founders who are product focused because I always ask them, if you go to a diner, right? Because you're hungry, you're solving a specific, you're hungry. If you're in front and you have no idea what to eat, if you're in front of a menu that has 14 pages because they have breakfast and they have the barbecue section, and then they have the Chinese food, and then they have the burgers, and then they have the sandwiches, and then they have the you're only ordering one thing. I just want my one thing. I'm hungry. This is what I want. Product is not going to save you. You need to make sure that you focus specifically on what your customer wants. If your customer is going to a steakhouse and they're going to Peter Luger's in New York City, they know they're going to pay $250 for the filet mignon. They know what their price was before they went to Peter Luger's. It's called Peter Luger's Steakhouse. They're not going there for a sandwich. They're going there for a steak. They might ask a couple of questions about what makes the steak special, but they're going to buy. In a diner, I don't know what you're buying, right? So having a million different products and features and widgets and spreads and whatever the things are on the software doesn't matter. If the customers aren't using it, twilight the damn things. Make them useful somewhere else, right? Revenue. You can always count on revenue to measure growth, right? If you have money coming into the bank that is not in the form of capital from an investor, you can definitely measure that as growth. Capital as well. If you're getting capital from investors, indicates that you're doing something right if you're working with the right investors. And data. If you have a wealth of data, you will never run out of ways to make money within your startup. So I want to frame what it is that we went over today, and then I want to open it up to different questions or different possible use cases. And I'm going to challenge my founders here to be open and vulnerable about those things, because whatever challenge it is that you're facing in terms of growth at your startup, other founders might be struggling with as well. And this is your opportunity to be brave, build community, and get an answer from me, because I don't get on the phone all the time. So in order to unleash RevOps science within your startup, you want to have a process: begin, operate, obviate, and maximize. Make sure that you're clear on your goals. Make sure that those goals are measurable, and make sure that all the stakeholders within your ecosystem, from customers to team to investors, are all really clear on it. Because once you are, you can operate in a way that's efficient by making sure that whatever investment of resources, capital, and humans are focused on the right actions that are taking you to the right outcomes. Once you get the right outcomes, you need to focus on the third step, which is obviate, making sure that whatever actions, goals, whatever the things are that you're taking are now going to be scalable as you continue to grow business. And then the fourth step, maximize, is making sure that you remain agile in reaction to the market. If something goes wrong, how long is it going to take you to course correct? If there's an opportunity, how long is it going to take you to capitalize? If there's a net new vulnerability, how long is it going to take you to fill that void? So that way you keep in the direction of marching towards your goal, which is revenue growth. Performance. If you look at your startup in terms of a buyer journey, you can then develop the data that you need to be monitoring that's going to indicate your revenue growth, get the team that's going to be in charge of launching actions and campaigns towards those growth. You as the founder are going to be able to understand what data they need and help to provide it for them. You can set KPIs together that you understand that are going to march towards that revenue growth. And then overall OKRs that put a timeline on them. And then you can measure how much revenue is going where. The other benefit is that you can also see, based on what we're doing as a startup, where would we place all the actions that we're doing today? Oh shit, it just so happens all of our fucking actions are in sales. How the hell are we going to how are we going to scale a startup that way? We need to start building campaigns that talk to expansion of our current customer base, that talk to retention of our current customer base, that focuses on engaging net new market. And one of the things that's usually a missed opportunity is creating awareness. I'm not going to pick up a New York Times because I want to read about this enormously technical article that's 3 pages long. No, I want a headline. What problem are you solving, right? I'm not ready to learn about the features of your product. I just want to know what problem you're solving and is it for me, before you start hitting me with all those product features, etc. Right? So once you understand what it is that you're doing in the direction of the 5 revenue generating pillars, it's an opportunity for you to build campaigns, data, strategy, and plans to start building other revenue streams instead of just focusing on 1 or 2. It's going to make you more scalable, and it's going to make you more attractive to investors. In terms of progress, this progress ladder, which is called the parallel growth plan, this actually lives and breathes inside of each one of the revenue pillars, because the progress that you're measuring on the clock, or over here are the KPIs, the progress that you're measuring on the calendar in terms of OKRs. And your OKR as the founder is revenue growth. How much revenue did we grow? If the answer is 0, then the next question is why? If they can tell you why, then you have an opportunity to course correct. That brings you all the way back to boom. We begin by discovering what we need to do. We launch the campaigns. Are they scalable? Now we got to react if things aren't going right. Or if things are going better than expected, how do we sustain all of this business, right? You want to unlock your opportunities, reveal your priorities, and defend your focus. Now I'm happy to take on very specific examples, become challenged with any kind of questions, and open up the floor to the founders.
Fantastic, Jonathan. Thank you so much. That was incredible. If anybody has any questions, please feel free to either unmute or you can type it in the chat and we will respond.
All right. So I'll take this opportunity also to take you to where you can get the free ungated resources to actually plot out each and every one of the items inside of RevOps Science right over here. It's going to be on the website. You're going to go over to the snacks because I'm always hungry. And I'm going to take this and I'm going to put it inside of the chat. All right. And you'll see here, there's a very brief explanation of RevOps Science over here in case you need a brief refresher. One page refreshers of different concepts that we put together, including what I always recommend to be what your metrics ladder should look like. If you're not measuring revenue tomorrow or you're unable to, and you're still fixing things to get up there, then these are the metrics that I always that I always recommend that you start with. And if you're not measuring them today or taking action within your startup to impact them, that should be your number one priority. Let's see. Oh, these are all of the playbooks, right? So if you want to build your boom, right? You want to get the operations of your startup together, you can build it here. The revenue growth formula, all resource planning. You want to be able to resource plan and prioritize what it is that you got going on. Your buyer persona versus your ideal client persona. Your ideal client profile. If you're B2B, you need to understand the very delicate difference between what a target client is and who the buyer personas are that work at that specific startup. And then oh no, that's not for you. But yeah, RevOps Snack Bar, I dropped the link and I see a question from Bajan. You got to help me pronounce your name. I don't want to keep killing it.
Oh, hi, Jonathan. Bijan is my name. Thank you again. Just wanted to ask for assigning a budget for marketing and sales. Do you have a recommendation for an early stage startup? And for a sales, like, is commission the best way to designate a sales director, like commission based only?
I'm gonna say I have no idea. You know why? Because I don't know what you're doing right, wrong, mixing, or confused in your startup. What one startup could recommend to you might not work for your startup. So what I would say is I would start by looking at, okay, what budget do I have? Well, first of all, I would start with the goal. What do I want from sales? In what amount of time? Cool. And then determine what is it that they're going to need from you to be successful. Because if you got a sales director, the sales director might not have experience being strategic and they might be focused on hand-to-hand combat doing sales all day. Well, how far is that going to get you? If they don't know how, if they're able to do the sale, but what if they're not able to train another salesperson? What if they need a BDR to do it? What if they need software to do it? Depends. If you present your sales team or your sales leadership with this is the goal, let's work on building this together, they're going to answer that question for you, not you or me.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Anyone else? I see an Alexandra. She's too quiet. I see a Kate in Phoenix. Questions, feedback. You want to throw a tomato at me? It's okay.
I have another question.
Go for it.
So you said that founders should really be focused on looking for investors. Is there like a right time?
Yes.
Okay.
This is where I go back on my soapbox. Listen, if you're on this call, you're queer. Okay. We have enough limited resources that we don't want to make the wrong first impression. We also don't want to be at the mercy of investors to where it's a hostile environment where you're now working for them and working on their metrics versus knowing what's right for your community of customers and for the development, growth, and scalability of your startup, right? So when it comes to investors, I always say it's gonna put you in the ultimate power position that you are already generating recurring revenue is the golden piece. If you're generating revenue, that's one thing. If you're generating recurring revenue on your own without their money, it's their opportunity to lose. There are gonna be investors that are going to be good for your startup and bad for your startup, right? But you're not going to be able to make that decision from a place of power unless you know that they see you as an opportunity and they're not doing you some fucking favor. And when it comes to Black, brown, and queer people, I am very territorial. I always like to make sure that with the limited amount of people that are willing to take our startups seriously, we need to approach them in a position of power and offer them the opportunity. Because if they're on the wrong side of innovation, then they're going to be the blockbuster to our Netflix. So, in very tactical terms, I would approach an investor at two stages. Number one, when you're in ideation phase, I have no idea what I'm doing. This is my plan on the back of a napkin. Give me $10,000 to get it started. You're going to be my angel. Cool. With that angel money, you need to start generating some revenue in very small scale and telling the data story with something like the revenue growth formula of how an investment like 500,000 or $1 million is going to scale what you're already doing. A good investor isn't going to want to help you to build something out of thin air if they're coming to at the growth phase. I'm no specialist when it comes to ideation and angel. Do I know angel? Sure, they judge based on their own set of variable metrics, whatever. But when you're in growth phase, when you already have a verifiable, bona fide business, and that thing is growing, from the perspective of an investor, because I also invest a bit myself, it just looks like a lot of good luck. You did $100,000 this quarter, you did $20,000 that quarter, you did $75,000 this quarter, and then your churn rate is horrible. How are you scaling? You're selling, you're generating revenue, but are you generating scale? I don't know. So as queer founders, I would always make sure to perfect the revenue generation piece because it'll give you a much stronger position and much shorter fundraising timelines when you can already prove that you have a scalable model.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Fantastic, Jonathan. Thank you once again for your time. We're excited to have you as a part of our community. For everybody who's watching, we'll get the recording out by the end of the week, along with any resources that Jonathan has for you all. But thank you all so much for joining us today. Have a great rest of your day.
All right. It was a pleasure.